LPT. Take a picture of your receipt after adding a tip and signing. If you're given a paper receipt to add a tip and sign after paying with a credit card, such as at a restaurant, take a picture of how you filled it out. This weekend I left a $6 tip on a bill, but when I checked my bank account the next day it had magically turned into a $60 tip. I called the restaurant and they asked if I had any evidence, to which I said no, but they should, because they should have the receipt and be able to see what I wrote down. They said they couldn't find it from one day prior, but after a while they did agree to refund my $60. Going forward, I'm going to start taking pictures of all these kinds of receipts after I enter my tip final amounts. Similar experience. I always take the customer copy now. Mark them the same. Keep the extra copy. It implies you have some evidence at least. A lady I worked with at a restaurant was caught changing credit card tips. Anytime they left both copies, she'd just write in a larger tip and copy their signature from the other one. Or sometimes she'd just change a 6 to an 8 or something like that. All it took was one person actually keeping track and checking their receipts against their account transactions, then calling the restaurant about why their charge was more than their records. The manager pulled the receipt and it was clearly changed. They then pulled all of hers going back a long time and figured out she'd been doing this for over a year. Yeah, they didn't have it because they did have it and they realized it was fraud. Same thing happened to me at a restaurant in NYC. I had pictures of the receipt just because I was claiming my dinner expenses from the company that I was interviewing for. I ended up filing a dispute with Amex and got it back. Not sure if this applies always, but when I leave a tip I always put a line after so they can't edit it, but in your case maybe spacing in the tip itself. So like 5.00, usually without space between the numbers and OFC, the tip plus the amount of the food, the total overall. But this sounds so shady. As a Canadian who recently traveled to the USA, I find it so weird that the pen and paper tipping thing is still commonplace. For the majority of places in Canada, they bring you the machine and you put the tip in yourself and a receipt gets printed. Famous red seafood restaurant. I had a $100 gift card and we spent $59 total. We were the last table for our server for the day. He nonchalantly bragged about making $500 in tips that day to another server while taking our order, which he later forgot to punch in, so we got our food 10 minutes before closing. We left around $15 in cash tips. No card tips. Just paid $59 for food with it. Next time I try to pay for the order at this place, it turns out the gift card has 3 cents left on it. One and only transaction was the day of our previous visit, for $99.97. I was speechless. If they don't have the receipt, then you are probably going to win when you file for a chargeback. I work for a financial institution and started doing this last year. When you take the picture, make sure it's the one labeled as merchant copy and it's included in the capture. Make sure you fill in the total line just below the tip line too as another cross-check. Just make sure it, maths properly. I've done my math wrong and they took the number that made the tip larger obviously. But that one was on me. Knew a bunch of girls in undergrad who worked as servers and bragged about writing their own tips. If customers left it blank or adding an extra zero. Gross behavior. Tipping culture shouldn't exist. I've worked in the service industry, and there are a few unscrupulous servers out there. But if you are overcharged, contest it with your credit card. The business will have to prove the amount is correct. More times than not, the place will say you're correct. That doesn't mean be a dick and fight every charge. BC, your bank will eventually close your account. But if you're overcharged, do a chargeback. It then puts it onto the restaurant to prove what you did. Tip in cash. It's the best way for everyone concerned. Longtime ex-server bartend WR who had the same thing happen too much. Always do this so it can be contested with your credit card company. I always take the customer copy. Stupid move to do what they did to you. Life pro tip: stop using a system that lets another person take your card away from your site. The United States is so far behind on payment systems, it's kinda funny. Nah, let them eat the credit card fraud charge. Scissor. My manager has a strict rule. If someone calls to dispute the tip, it will be reverted, no questions asked. Never understood why Americans do this. In Canada you pay at the table and add the tip there. Hello, bank? A restaurant charged me a $60 tip on a $30 bill. Obviously it was meant to be $6. Please reverse this. Okay, literally every bank ever. Or, hello, restaurant? You charged me a $60 tip on a $30 bill. That's obviously not correct. Please reverse it or I'm disputing the entire meal with my bank and you can convince them I tipped $60 on a $30 bill. Either of these are infinitely better than neurotically taking photos of your receipts for the rest of your life in preparation for something that might happen once ever. What in the American? Just dispute it. The restaurant will have to prove with an image of your signed receipt. They will get in major trouble if shown to be altered. I am sure they will not dispute it if they did alter it. Sounds like a lot of fucking work for something that will probably never happen to me, tbh. I don't understand this ridiculous US credit card system. This kind of shit never happens where I live, Netherlands. I manage a restaurant. This happens all the time. It was almost definitely an accident. Server smashed an extra button. It happens. I've never once asked for proof when adjusting a tip. We are obligated to save the credit card slips for a period. We do. But I am not going to sort through them. I trust the guest when it's this clear. I then speak with the server. Tell them to be more careful. And usually withhold the appropriate funds. The server can rebut by going through the receipts if they want. I've always wondered about this. But don't recall it ever happening. It could have possibly and I didn't notice. From now on I will have to be more cautious with it. I like the touchscreen where you enter the tip. But those are definitely not available everywhere. I worked with servers who would write in extra zeros on the tips when wealthy diners would only tip 10. Their rationale was they don't know any better and they can absolutely afford it. They literally never got caught once. Restaurant manager here. Why more often than fraud is a Ms. Key when the manager enters the tips separately at the end of shift. Sometimes we are doing hundreds of these a day and it's easy for a mistake to happen. But also we keep paper copies for several months, so it should be a relatively easy fix. Servers aren't typically trying to rip people off. I think I've had one instance in 20 years. As a Canadian, I was shocked when I visited Chicago this year and asked for the machine. I was looked at like I was crazy. You guys really still just do the paper thing when you could have a wireless Interac machine you could tap your card to or insert the chip? I thought the US was a technologically advanced country? Do you still have the Visa machine that makes carbon copies of your card when you buy shoes? Out of curiosity, your bank doesn't have an app that shows notifications when your card is charged. I get a notification every time my card is charged and I get the notification almost as soon as the payment gets through. Is writing in tips on the bill still a thing in the US? Here the waiter just brings the Interac terminal to the table and you're prompted for the tip after you confirm the total. Before you enter your PIN,